It's the Regular Expressions podcast. Join Noah Heldman and Ben Griswold as they talk about technology, consulting, and life. In episode 8, Ben and Noah talk about AI, the hype and the reality.
Hey, Ben. How's it going?
Everything is awesome. How are you, Noah?
Well, I can't do better than that, but equally awesome. I'll just go with that. Hey, we hinted in our last episode about AI. And I know we both have used it personally, and we have our stories, positive and negative in that area. Mm-hmm. And we both used it commercially to help out customers, positives and negatives there too. We know there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of good. There's a lot of bad. I think we can dig into that today. What do you think?
Love it. Love it. Yeah, I'd say, with Gen AI today, there's a lot of headline grabbers. It's you hear the story of the vibe coder that has, worked over the weekend and raised millions of dollars for their company. You have the big tech companies that are touting that they're replacing a chunk of their workforce, just around kind of that productivity through AI, right? Even in the case where you've got to verify that, in fact, your job is needed. Why can your job not be replaced by AI? So there's just enough in the media that gives this interesting spin around AI that I think we should really cover.
Well, and we've also seen in our connections with large consulting firms, the investment that these companies are making. And I think it's really interesting. It's $1 billion plus for any of the big consulting firms, sometimes $3 or $4 billion being invested into AI. There's also the investment from some of the big AI players like OpenAI into consulting. So coming at the problem from a different angle, and it'll be really interesting to see which approach gains traction. Consulting, as we've talked about in this podcast, is a unique set of skills, and it takes time to refine and develop those. Using AI effectively is a unique set of skills, and it takes time to refine that. So someone who has been a consultant in the data science, machine learning space probably has a huge advantage over others because they know a lot of those big pitfalls with massive data, trying to extract intent, natural language processing, turning those things into useful information for a company. So it is going to be a fascinating couple of years to see where this all shakes out.
Yeah, for sure. And, I don't know the numbers, but I feel like there's dozens, perhaps hundreds of people worldwide that really get it, that are really shaping AI, really getting into like those real edge cases, building out things that the OpenAIs and Microsoft and others are developing. But that's a really hard problem, especially when things are changing each and every day. I also think of companies like Amazon, companies like Apple, what they haven't been able to do with Alexa and Siri over many, many years, because this is a problem space that's really, really hard, even when you have top talent that's, sometimes acquired, paid lots of money to come into your company and make a difference in this space.
It's a really hard problem. And beyond that, we're dealing with so much of a gain in capability so quickly that we're seeing massive disruption. There's my dog. Hi, dog. Massive disruption in terms of how a culture needs to incorporate AI in a way that's productive, safe, secure. Right. We've heard the stories of layoffs and replacing certain jobs with AI. I feel like it's so early still in the process, even with how fast we're moving through it all, to really say, here's what's going to happen. We've seen the massive improvements in our own productivity, and we've also seen the flip side of it, where it feels like you're being productive because you get detailed, complex answers quickly. But then when you look back at how much time you're spending unraveling it, not sure we're yet at a place where it's a big productivity gain.
Yeah, totally agree. I've really gave some thought to this last Friday, just around the value of some of these tools that we have. Like, sure, I'm able to just have a stream of consciousness and throw that into ChatGPT or, one's favorite chat. And it really does speed things up. However, I then have to go back and update myself or continue to iterate. And it at the end, not sure it really makes a big difference for me productivity wise. There's a perception though, and I think that this is all perception, or maybe some of the information that we're getting. I'm thinking about the big tech firms who make the big bets on AI and all. They're not going to broadcast out for stakeholders' sake and otherwise that, oh, my bet didn't work out. Right? It's got to only be the positive outcomes that we're reflecting on. So we're going from my example, which is using ChatGPT, which pretty much anybody can use today, to the billions and billions of dollars investment and the what's in between, right? I believe that we both have some experience on the in between stuff, whether it be extracting data from medical billing papers, which in fact have, handwritten results versus some typed. Sometimes these PDFs come in sideways, like really a benefit to trying to pull that data to complement having some human in the loop, just to make sure that, whatever has been extracted is correct.
Yeah, I think of prompt engineering, which is now something that is a really common term, and didn't think about how important that was until fairly recently, despite it being quite obvious. And I think that's because AI gives you back what you put into it. And if you are using the vibe coding, very casual stream of consciousness, as you called it, approach, you'll get back impressive results, but they won't solve your problem, most likely.
Sure.
And this becomes even more of an issue in high value strategic technology consulting work. And for sure with coding, we've both spent a good bit of time just working through coding from the vibe side and from the spec-based development side, which I found to be much more successful. And it comes down to how much effort and time will you put into proper structure of what you give AI to work with, and setting clear context, setting clear boundaries, and giving it as many examples as you can to help through that process. What has happened in the industry is the large language models have tried to be quite generic and open to taking in a lot of information and giving you decent response back. The problem is, the more narrow your problem space, the less accurate it will be from a generic model, which totally makes sense. And the trick is, it's actually really hard and really time consuming and really expensive to build something that solves a very industry specific problem. We've both seen some really cool things, but that's where that knowledge of machine learning, of data science, of what it means to fine tune a model, to repeatedly train it, to help it avoid hallucinations, to limit the problem space to what it should care about and make sure it knows what to avoid. That is a really involved iterative process that takes time and is expensive, not only from just how much it takes to get things right, but how much it takes to run things. And I know that you and I have talked about just the expense of AI and running these types of models. So curious if you have other thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I also have to consider the expense of, just the ethical concerns, like whether,
Right.
that could end up becoming, tied to some legal repercussions or misinformation or just offending, right? Like, I think that's a really big thing. It's the regulation, which we just haven't really figured out. But where I feel that doesn't get enough attention is around the environmental cost, right? I think this is right, where it costs about 10 times more energy to do a search inside of Chat GPT compared to just running that same search inside of Google, right? Like that's scary to me. Just the consumption cost around a very basic, ubiquitous tool now that everybody has their hands on and everyone can leverage. Yeah, I wish we brought a little bit more attention of that, and if we could train people on maybe just one thing: is what is a ChatGPT or Gemini, etc., really good at, and what should we be leveraging it for, compared to what are those searches that you still should be leaning on a Google for, right? And that's very basic, just user awareness that we should be considering.
Well, and it's beyond just the search side of it, which is a great point. It's how are you solving a problem inside your company? And so many companies are looking for ways to adopt AI, back to the solution first approach that we talked about before. I think in a lot of cases, basic automation, basic extraction of intent, and running queries against data sources to get the info you need will solve the problem and will avoid that exorbitant environmental cost. What I think is interesting is you really don't get a sense of that cost until you try to run these models on your own hardware. And even some of the smallest models out there that might be 3 to 7 billion parameters, which sounds like a lot, but it's really not in the scheme of things right now. You can have a very high-powered computer just struggle and take 10 to 20 seconds to respond to anything you throw at it. And it's a smaller model, so it's just not going to give you impressive results. And now we've come to expect impressive results, which are only possible with these massive, almost trillion parameter models that take, like you said, this immense amount of hardware and energy to run. It's just like Google in the old days when Google was working on faster and faster search results. Nothing else could come close. And they were searching billions of pages, and they would come back in 100 milliseconds or less. Now that's an expectation. So in my mind, the only thing that will really resolve this, because it's either more and more parameters for more intelligent models, which require more and more hardware to run. It's either the model has to change and there's a completely different model architecture, and LLMs are just a stepping stone on that. And there's some really interesting alternative models that I've read about that might have some options, or it's a change in chipset manufacturing and design, where we don't have these high cost, high heat GPUs that can only handle what they can handle. So there needs to be this massive revolution in either the model or the chips that run them to save costs, or the environment is screwed.
And when that happens, then it's people. People are going to feel the brunt of that, for sure, on the other side of it. And, we, in most of our podcasts and most of our conversations with clients, we talk about people, and we talk about the impact of people, whether they're the impact on the successful outcome of a project, or just successfully leveraging their tools. And I think this really comes into that, managing change effectively within the workplace? Like, are you training up your people all right? Are you enabling them to do the more interesting work on the stuff that, yeah, maybe they could distribute their workload to agents, which I don't see that happening really very soon for most folks. But perhaps like bringing everybody within your organization along for this ride, making sure they all have that same mindset and realize that this is only going to be a boon for them. And why don't embrace it while you're destroying the universe?
Well, that brings up another concern, which is everyone's talking about AI replacing junior engineers, right?
Yeah.
It can solve the problems that we all learned as stepping stones to more interesting and complex problems. So does that mean those opportunities for junior engineers go away? They don't have a clear path to learn what they need to get to the level of the 15, 20, 25-year technology expert?
Sure.
That's a major concern, and we need to find ways to address that. I don't know if you've thought about that problem at all, but I haven't solved it.
Yeah, I haven't solved it either, but I do think that they're in a precarious situation. I think that a lot of the learning that a young person has when they have joined the workforce is a trial and error, like going through problem solving on their own, recognizing that all problems are basically the same. It's just what's that tool and what was the tool I used here? How did I get there? Right. And so the problem solving skill is just going away. I think it goes away way before they come into the workforce, right? Through like schooling, like for sure, right? Like where they're outsourcing a lot of that problem solving to, OpenAI and Microsoft. So that's the part that I really believe is critical when it comes to consulting and software engineering, problem solving. But then there's this other aspect of and I'm sorry, I think you had something that you wanted to throw at that.
I agree that the problem solving is a huge part of what will be missing. I'm just trying to think of how do we keep that alive for people? How do we give them those opportunities? Is it as simple as not giving them access to AI without, just enforcing that they can't use it ever? There's got to be some sort of balance. There may be just training programs or expectations that are laid out in these organizations so that people do have to use their brains and they can't outsource that part of the job.
Yeah. Well, perhaps one of the ways that it can be done is, let's say you do have an individual that's coding for you, right? 1-2 years out of school. There still are some of the engineering best practices that one can follow. Let's say ahead of implementing any solution, they start thinking about design, like figuring out how they in fact want to write their prompts or the specs, as you mentioned. Once they have coded something up, there's still pull requests. There's still a review from more senior people, I hope. So there's some learning there where they can get that feedback from people who had the luxury, I'm going to say luxury, of coding prior to having any of the assistants code for them. So there's that checks and balances. You probably through tribal knowledge through some mentorship or coaching where you can at least continue down the right path and probably learn as you go. But I think that there's going to be a lot of senior engineers that just level up their ability to code. And I think that is going to put a bit of the burden on the green engineers to really figure it out swiftly in order to be really valued in a team where you've got the 10x engineers now at the top of the food chain.
Well, you actually gave me what I think might be a possible solution to this issue now that we've kind of talked about the real problem. it comes down to people once again, and a junior engineer still needs to be mentored by a human being. And no matter what tools they may have at their disposal, like you said, even if it's a PR review or you're doing pair programming, something that gives you an opportunity to sit with and learn from someone who has gone through this experience.
Sure.
That's incredibly valuable. I think of when you first introduced me to Stack Overflow, when it was brand new, the site had just been announced.
Sure.
You're like, hey, check out this thing. I just found it. I think it's going to be something. And boy, were you right. It turned it into the first tool like AI that was a massive accelerator. As it built up and you learned you could trust it, you would go out there for snippets to solve very specific problems. And you didn't have to write the sort algorithm for this perfect use case in Python or in Haskell or whatever language you were using. You could go and find it, and you could find justification. You could find arguments from other senior people for and against it, and use that as an evaluation. So it was an incredible accelerator from that perspective, but we still had to solve the problems ourselves. We had to put the pieces together, and we still had our meetings of our technical architecture group and our developers to talk through the impact and the implications of all those things. And that was incredibly valuable. And I think we have a similar opportunity. It's just that AI can do so much more so fast that it runs the risk of just like blowing past that opportunity to problem solve. So keep the humans involved, keep the mentorship, keep the training. That's how we're going to stay ahead of this thing.
Yeah. Even more important now that humans keep talking and sharing, learning from each other as they're learning how to leverage the tools in a new way. Totally agree.
Yep.
I'm still trying to figure out how to automate my job away. And, based on our backgrounds and all, based on our technical know-how, I just see it like this should be something I can do, but very, very far from that. I'm looking forward to those use cases, and there's definitely things that I can automate that can make my life just a little bit quicker. A few of those routines, but they're not significant enough that they're making me so that I don't have a job anymore. Well,
yeah, I find the same. There have been times for fairly straightforward types of things, like even building the website for my company, and I think you had a similar thing. I put in very basic information and said, build me a website. Here's a color scheme that I want to go for. Here's a little bit of the philosophy behind what I'm trying to do. And it generated an 85% ready to go site in about 30 seconds. That was remarkable. But on the flip side, I've had to do something that was maybe just slightly more complicated and spent all day, 8 hours solid, back and forth, just never really getting to an answer that I felt was sufficient. So it's lots of positives and lots of time spent.
Yes. And the 85% done, like you mentioned on the website, 30 seconds. I wonder how long for that last 15, because I know I iterate and sometimes just scream while I'm doing it. But it's a really enjoyable experience. I've got to say, like leveraging these tools, but the amount of rework. So I'm not only happy with the outcome, but how the code, how the frameworks are getting there. I'm not sure I feel 100% great about it yet. So there's that rework component, which is awesome. And I don't know, I'm excited, as you said, when we opened this up, like where things are going to go in the next year or two, on the people side and on the tech side of this. And environmental.
Yep. I hope the costs go down. I hope the energy usage goes down, and there's amazing advancements in that space. That would be incredible. I'm optimistic. I'm always optimistic, but so great potential. We still have jobs. We're still relevant for the moment, which is good.
Yes.
And if we're in a pretty good place here, I just have this quote in the back of my head from someone that you and I worked with for decades. I feel like it might be a nice way to wrap it up. Our friend who is also a technical architect and a consultant with decades of experience and truly one of the most human people you will ever meet, and just really values the human side of consulting, has said this quote probably for as long as I've known him, and it is, "I, for one, welcome our robot overlords." So never has that been more appropriate than right now. So I have to go back and talk to him about that, see how he feels about it today.
There we go. I think we might have a podcast title.
Yeah, that might be it. That's perfect.
Oh, awesome. Great topic. Glad we chatted.
Yeah, we could probably do 3 more on this, but we'll leave it there for now.
That's right. All right, Noah. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. See you later.